Let's close our eyes. Pay attention to your body. Notice any changes. Notice the energy movements. Notice any pains, aches, any disturbances. Take a deep breath in through your nose. And release it through your mouth. Breathe in lots of positivity. And breathe out any and all disturbances. Pay attention to your heart center. Be aware of the feelings. Breathe in love, faith, and integrity. Breathe out any negative emotions, any stuck emotions, any chaos that you feel in your heart center. Breathe in peace and prosperity. Know that you are peace. Say, I am peace. I am love. I am happiness. And breathe out any adverse associations with peace and prosperity. Breathe in joy and care. Feel every cell in your body reverberate with loads of energy, of joy and care. And release any of that unsettled energy at all levels of your body. Resume normal breathing. Invoke your ancestors, angels, angel guides, who can guide us, help us, align us. Invoke them in our space, welcome them in our space, and seek their support and blessings. Let's invoke our great healing and loving masters, Mahavtar Babaji, any of the family deities, family gurus. Invite them in your space and seek their blessings. Invoke your higher consciousness. Know that you are guided by your higher consciousness. through what we call as intuitions. Every moment we are guided. Align with this higher consciousness. Invoke radical consciousness and prime resource energy. Express your gratitude to Radical, to Atman, to all our mentors who have made this possible for us to clear very subtle thoughts and energies on daily basis and help us evolve further. Become aware of the reality with fresh morning air. Listen to any of the sounds around you and come back to the reality. And let's see what's in store for us today. Thank you. It is CR13, right self-reliance chakra. CR13, right self-reliance chakra. A reminder to stop waiting for others to lift you up in life or help you out in a situation. Rely on yourself to achieve what you want to achieve. I think it's bang on today. Wake up, take charge. So you could feel disappointed when you know that there are people in your universe who can easily give a boost to your personal or professional life, and yet they're opting out of it. How about giving a boost to your own self? That too in your own unique way. You may not be able to control others' approach or responses. However, you can always take charge and do what is needed to be done in your capacity. Know that even God helps those who help themselves. Waiting for others to respond to your expectations of uplifting you may turn futile, frustrating, and time-consuming. It is best you do what needs to be done on your own, uplift yourself, better yourself and the world around you, without waiting or expecting anything from others. So let's do some R5. Who will repeat?
I will, ma'am.
Okay.
If Asha is not doing that.
No, if you wants to do, Lakshmiji, you can do.
No,
If you,
no, you
ask,
do.
I can do.
Yeah, you continue.
Okay, thank you, Lakshmiji.
I R5 my need for self-reliance.
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 I R5 the reasons for my self-reliance.
I R5 the reason for the self-reliance.
I R5 the reasons for my self-reliance.
I R5 the reason for the self-reliance.
I R5 the reasons for my self-reliance.
I R5 the reason for the self-reliance.
I R5 my association of self-reliance with hard work.
I archive my association of self-reliance with hard work.
I archive my association of self-reliance with hard work.
I archive my association of self-reliance with hard work.
I archive my association of self-reliance with hard work.
I archive my association of self-reliance with hard work.
I archive my expectations that others should help me.
I archive my expectation that others should help me.
I archive my expectation that others should help me.
I archive my expectation that others should help me.
I archive my expectations that others should help me.
I archive my expectation that others should help me.
I archive my oaths, vows, and promises preventing me to be self-reliant.
I archive my oaths, verbs, and promises preventing me from self-reliance.
I archive my oaths, vows, and promises preventing me from being self-reliant.
I archive my oaths, verbs, and promises preventing me from self-reliance.
I archive my oaths, vows, and promises preventing me to be self-reliant.
I archive my oaths, verbs, and promises preventing me from self-reliance.
I admit my need. I admit my expectations under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I archive my expectation under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my expectations under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my expectation under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my expectations under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my expectation under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my demands from others under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my demands from others under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my demand of others under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my demands of others under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my demand of others under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my demands of others under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my fear of being self-reliant under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my
fear of being self-reliant.
I admit my fear of being self-reliant under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my fear of being self-reliant under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my fear of self-reliance under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my fear of being self-reliant under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my fear of being self-reliance under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit all my adverse associations with self-reliance under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my all my what ma'am?
Adverse associations with self-reliance.
I admit my adverse association of self-reliance under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit all my adverse associations with self-reliance under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit all my self-reliance under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit all my adverse associations with self-reliance under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit all my adverse association of self-reliance under the loving care of radical consciousness.
Yeah, any thoughts, any ideas?
Ma'am, it's just like that ki, too much searching like that. Too much searching and too much stories, ma'am. Not concentrating on myself. Too much story,
Yeah,
ma'am.
yeah. I admit my stories under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my stories under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my stories under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my stories under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my stories under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my stories under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my defense mechanisms under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my defense mechanism under the loving care of radical consciousness. I admit my defense mechanism under the loving care of radical consciousness. I admit my defense mechanism under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my need to escape from under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my need for escape under the loving care of radical consciousness. But what does it mean, ma'am?
I admit my need to escape. You don't want to face it. You just want to run away from all of this.
Okay, okay.
Right. So, or you can say, I admit my need to run away under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my need to run away from under the loving care of radical consciousness. I admit my need to run away under the loving care of radical consciousness. I admit my need to run away under the loving care of radical consciousness. I admit my need to run away under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my fear of facing the brunt under the loving care of radical consciousness.
I admit my need for facing the blunt under the loving care of radical consciousness. I admit my need of facing the blunt under the loving care of radical consciousness. I admit my need to facing blunt under the loving care of radical consciousness.
You're okay?
Yeah, ma'am.
All right. What's happening?
Ma'am, two things are coming. Not everything doing halfway, not doing, not giving 100% on one thing, on one matter, and what is reality, do not want to accept it.
Yeah, yeah. Again,
everything, many things doing, like, but halfway, not doing, not giving 100% in every in any field.
Yeah. Again, it's a need to cover our self-defense mechanism, right? Because when I do 100% of one thing, what will I get?
Ma'am, if I give 100% to one thing, my life will be growth. And nowadays it's stuck where I am, where it was before in past, it was in now, now moment.
So when you give 100%, you will grow, correct?
Yeah, ma'am.
What happens when you grow? Are you there?
Yeah, ma'am. Just thinking. Ma'am, what Asha is now, she will change.
So what happens when Asha changes?
This story will be changed, ma'am.
What happens when stories change? Okay, typically what happens is we have a hidden fear. You want to explore that today and see if this resonates. When Asha changes, when Asha grows, when Asha is not stuck with the old pattern and old stories, then Asha could be lonely. Asha could be alone. Does that resonate?
Ma'am, I will think about it. I
Okay.
can't
Yeah.
understand about all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, ma'am.
So typically there is definitely a brilliance, there is definitely a takeaway for why we are doing whatever we are doing. So if we are not wanting to be self-reliant out of fear, then there is a takeaway. That's why we are holding on to being dependent. And we have all the abilities to be independent, to be self-reliant, but we won't take it up because I'm afraid that people will start taking advantage of me. People will start leaving me. People will say, okay, Shubha can do it. Shubha can do it. Let her do it. And I may be left alone. So either which way, my subconscious will protect me from that something unknown. And hence we will not want to be that, a full person. We don't want to grow. So we choose back. So we do not want to put 100% effort.
Ma'am,
We do not
maybe
want to take.
people will not like it that I'm growing. See, they want to see me in this position, and I want to grow, and they will not accept it. They will not like
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
that is an
people will not
excuse.
accept it. Yeah.
That is an excuse mind gives.
Okay.
That's a head level excuse that mind gives. Okay, but at heart level, when you look at it, there could be a deep fear that, yeah, people may not access. Somewhere people will start commenting, abhi change ho gayi hai, देखो एज हो गया तो चेंज हो गई, तो देखो ये क्या
Story
डॉक्टर
income.
बन गई तो ये चेंज हो गई. We have heard people talk like that around us, right? तो बाल सफेद बन गए तो चेंज हो गई, एज हो गया तो अभी चलता नहीं है तो चेंज होना ही पड़ता है.
Oh God.
We hear this all. We have also participated in such conversations before.
Ma'am, this is our society gossip.
Yeah, yeah. And that's how we at one point we enjoyed, but now it's more like my own thing is at stake.
Ma'am, we all enjoying in gossip. We want to gossip.
Yeah, see, that is a feel good factor. अगर मुझसे कुछ नहीं हो रहा है तो आपसे भी कुछ नहीं होता है तो चलो ठीक है. But if you are doing something and I cannot do, then it becomes a problem.
Yes, ma'am. It's a main problem that people do not want that is why she will do. So iska pad khicho. Many
Right.
times this will happen in our lives. Yeah.
Correct. So one thing that we want to take away today is anytime I'm saying people, anytime I say people, then it is an expectation.
Okay.
It is my demand that people should do this to me, people, whatever. And we are so unique that none of my demands can be fulfilled by anybody. Similarly, none of the demands others have of me, I cannot fulfill.
Okay.
So we can never fulfill each other's expectations 100% fully every time. We can compromise, we can do a little bit of it, but expectations and demands, we can never make another person happy. If you can get that, then automatically my expectation drops and compassion comes up. And that would be one way out for me to become self-reliant. Okay, there is no other option but for me to be self-reliant, because when I depend on you to cook something for me, then you are going to cook in a Marwadi way. You are going to put some more this or more that, and my South Indian taste will always complain about it. Unless I'm such a versatile person that I enjoy every delicacy, every taste of the region. Right. So
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think today we'll stick with I take responsibility. I take responsibility.
For my growth.
Definitely. But I want that expectations to come in. You know, I want to say something like not to expect from others at all. So I take responsibility. Maybe just help me. I archive my expectations. I archive my need for expectations. I archive the reasons for my expectations. I honor my expectations. I honor my expectations and choose to be self-reliant. Or can we just say I choose to be self-reliant unconditionally? Would that work?
Yes, ma'am.
I choose to be self-reliant unconditionally. I choose to be self-reliant unconditionally. No conditions, no demands. I just am self-reliant. So be aware of that. At any moment, if when any thought comes of that person is not helping me, this person is not giving this to me, say, is this self-reliance or is this dependence?
Okay, ma'am.
Then I say I choose to be self-reliant. Then
Okay,
automatically the dependency drops.
Okay, ma'am.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.